Hello, everybody. Mike Rocco, President and CEO of the Marines Memorial, and welcome to tonight's event. Just take a moment, look around. Look around this fantastic room. It's great to have everybody back. 2.5 years now, we're going almost 3 years when we not shut down, but slowed down during COVID. This place emptied out pretty quickly, but we're back, and it's thanks to you all, thanks to the members, thanks to the dues that you pay, thanks to the donations, and thanks to your support. And we're thrilled to have somebody speaking here tonight that is he epitomizes what this club's about, and General Vandergrift's vision from 1946. So before I introduce him, let me just say a couple of thanks to the crowd, to in the back, to Ramiro, to Vooch, his Voochness. We got J.J. Banks back there. Brandon's taking pictures. We've got Judy and Yolanda out in membership, if anybody, donations or membership, but they're out there. But it really is, it's easy for anybody to come up here, just grab the microphone and start speaking, but the work that goes in and just setting it all up, and it's really appreciative. So a round of applause for the staff here, and just a fantastic job. For those of you who come to these events, you know I always introduce and a special call out to Michael Allen. He's not here tonight, unfortunately, but he is here in spirit, but he had some problems, some car issues, but Michael Allen, we couldn't do it without him. And really, I just want to recognize just a few people here to the front row. We've got Mr. Don Reed, Korean War veteran. We've got and I always refer to this place as the house that Myatt built. General Myatt is in the front row here. Round of applause. Board members, Pete Paffrat. We've got Barry Graham, former chairman of the foundation, his wife Juliana, and my wife Susan. And I can honestly say we wouldn't be here, I know, without our better half. So really thank you for all of you attending and the support. And General Myatt, it's always great to see you back in the house. So with that, we've got General George Smith with us, Lieutenant General George Smith. He is the commanding general of the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force. Won't give you a lecture on the Marine Corps, but the 1 MEF, there are 3 MEFs in the Marine Corps. 1 MEF is the largest MEF in the Marine Corps. It is the premier command in the Marine Corps, and it speaks volumes to George and his background. He's an infantry officer by trade. I know he's worked with some of you. We've crossed paths, being an aviator. We've crossed paths through our lives. Fleet was fun. Headquarters Marine Corps and manpower was not so much fun when we crossed, but that's, you take the good with the bad. But I know he spoke, and I know we got Brendan Kearney here, who's a former, and I know he actually worked for you, and he's got some great stories about sending him to Tonga. But again, that's one thing that's wonderful about the Marine Corps, the military in general, the Marine Corps. You always get these stories and the intertwine, and whether it's generations ago or whether it's yesterday, there's always those connections that we make. So please join me in a warm Marines Memorial Association welcome for Lieutenant General George Smith. It's an honor to have you here, my friend.
Thanks, Patrick. I appreciate it, brother. In the darkest days of the Civil War for our Union, President Lincoln used to ride by horseback up to a telegraph station north of Washington, up on a hill, where he would get reports directly from the battlefield. And one day he rode up there to receive a report of yet another Union calamity. This time, a Union encampment out in Western Virginia had been overrun by a Confederate cavalry detachment. And they captured a general and 100 horses. And President Lincoln, sat in his chair and he read this report and he kind of slumped back, and under his breath he murmured, 100 horses. And the young telegraph operator who gave him the report finally worked up enough courage to say, but Mr. President, what about the general? And Lincoln looked at him and said, son, I can make a general in 5 minutes, but 100 horses. I like that story because it personally keeps me grounded. It keeps me focused on what's important. And what's important for me are the 46,000 Marines and sailors that comprise one Marine Expeditionary Force, our horses. So I have to tell you, I am extremely honored to represent those great young men and women here this evening. General Rocco, thanks for your kind invitation. Susan, wonderful to see you again. Badfinger, just additionally, thank you for your tremendous leadership and stewardship of this amazing, amazing living memorial here. I know it's the house that General Myatt built, but you're the current steward, and so there's a lot of responsibility on your shoulders, and we all thank you collectively. General Myatt, sir, it's always an honor to be in the same room with you. Thanks for being here this evening, sir. And to Vooch and the entire staff here at Marines Memorial, thanks for just the ever-present wonderful, warm hospitality that you've shown me over the last couple of days. It's always a treat to come back up here. You know, next week down at Camp Pendleton, we're going to commemorate the 20th anniversary of the commencement of Operation IRAQI FREEDOM, when we crossed the line of departure from Kuwait into Iraq. And so we're bringing back a bunch of the alumni from the 1 Marine Expeditionary Force command element, to include General Conway, who was our MEF commander at the time and went on, as you know, to become our 34th Commandant. And so we look forward to hosting them down there next week. And I personally am in a somewhat unique position to talk about 1 MEF then and 1 MEF now over the course of 20 years, because back then, as a brand new lieutenant colonel, I was the lead planner for General Conway over the course of 14 months in planning that operation between 2002 and 2003. And of course, for the last 18 months, I've had the distinct honor of serving as the commanding general of 1 MEF. And so this evening, I would like to, hopefully talk about, the importance of our Marine Air Ground Task Forces in general. 1 MEF being one of those Marine Air Ground Logistics Task Forces, as I like to call them, even though it's not in the acronym. The unique contributions that our MAGTAFs provide to the Joint Force, frankly, an unparalleled contribution. And so I want to provide a little bit of the flavor of that over the course of my remarks this evening. I thought it would be helpful to just answer what is, I get a question, question a lot, what do you focus on, with such a large command? And I'm a simple infantryman of 38 years, so I do things in threes. Three fire teams in a squad, 3 squads in a platoon, 3 platoons in a rifle. So I do things in threes. So we have 3 principal lines of effort in our campaign plan, which provides my kind of broad focus every day. First and foremost is on warfighting readiness. Secondly, I focus on what we call posture, deterrence, and reassurance in the Western Pacific, west of the international date line, and I'll talk more about that here in a second. And then finally, we talk about 1 MEF future. How are we modernizing? More simply put, we deploy forces in support of global requirements. So, and principally, I resource combat-capable formations to serve with our 3rd Marine Expeditionary Force headquartered out in Okinawa, Japan, through our unit deployment program. But I also source off the West Coast Marine Expeditionary units for service with our numbered fleet commanders and certainly other units in support of combatant commanders around the globe. We are an Indo-PACOM assigned force in 1 Marine Expeditionary Force, which means I work operationally, ultimately, for Admiral Aquilino out in Camp Smith, Hawaii. And we are laser focused now that we have shaken off kind of what I've described as a CENTCOM hangover over the last 2 decades. We are laser focused on supporting Admiral Aquilino's broader deterrence efforts against our principal adversary and pacing threat in the Pacific. And we all know who that is, China. Not the Chinese people, but the Chinese Communist Party and the People's Liberation Army within that. So we are laser focused on Admiral Aquilino's priorities. But as General Rocco said, we are the largest warfighting organization in the United States Marine Corps. So by default, I have global responsibilities. General Berger has described one MEF as the Corps' strategic hedge, and I think that's, an apt description. I will tell you that last August, I had Marines and sailors operating and exercising in every geographic combatant command. Every geographic combatant command. We had Marines and sailors down in Australia, in Japan, in Korea, in the Philippines, in Palau, in Hawaii, in Alaska, down in Chile, in East Africa, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Poland, on the southwest border of our United States. And I had the first F-35C squadron embarked on the USS Abraham Lincoln as part of our tactical aviation or air integration with the United States Navy. That's a busy Marine Air Ground Task Force with global responsibilities. And we're proud of that. As I speak this evening, our 13th Marine Expeditionary Unit is underway in the South China Sea. I've got Marines winging their way to Australia to start a 7-month deployment as our rotational force Marine Air Ground Task Force down there in Darwin, Australia. At the same time, I have Marines flying to East Africa to start a 7-month deployment in that direction. I've got multiple engineer detachments in the Western Pacific doing infrastructure improvement projects for our partners throughout the second and first island chains to not only improve their quality of life, but also look through a contingency lens as to what we might need in the form of advanced naval bases and the infrastructure we would require, particularly through a logistics and broader sustainment front in the case that we have to respond to a number of different contingencies. So a lot going on, steady state. I also have a multidiscipline intelligence collections platform, as I'll describe it, that's operating, again, day on, stay on, in the second and first island chains to answer not only my priority intelligence requirements, but those of the Pac Fleet Commander and ultimately Admiral Aquilino at Indo-Pacific Command. And next month, I will deploy just over 300 Marines and sailors from my headquarters to the Philippines to serve as a Joint Task Force headquarters for Exercise Balakatan. That's a first for one Marine Expeditionary Force at that type of scale. And again, we've been focused in the CENTCOM area of responsibility for the better part of 2 decades because that's what we were directed to do. So now swinging back to the Pacific, this is particularly powerful. This is particularly powerful for the United States Marine Corps in that it demonstrates 2 Marine Expeditionary Forces, 1 and 3 MEFs, operating west of the international date line in steady state campaigning as part of Admiral Aquilino's broader deterrence effort. That's more than 75% of the Marine Corps' warfighting capacity operating together. And we basically come together in the Philippines during Exercise Balakatan. So that's very, very powerful. Let me talk just a little bit about that third leg of the stool that I referenced, if you will, modernization. Change is hard. We all know that. I mean, I once heard Jeff Immelt, the CEO of General Electric, say that change has a constituency of 1. I also heard that a candle maker was never going to invent electricity. So change is hard. But frankly, change, modernization is a constant in our Corps. That's what we do. We've always adapted to ever-changing operational environments. That's a must. That's what we do. I think a lot of the churn, if you will, that you read about or you hear about the significant change underway in our Corps is a result of not tying that change to the capabilities, the lethality of our Marine Air Ground Task Forces. And I have one simple rule down in 1MEF, and that is, at least not in my presence, don't talk about a discrete capability or a new formation in isolation. You better talk about how it enhances, how it increases the lethality of our Marine Air Ground Logistics Task Force. We don't talk enough about that. And we have to. We have to. Now, modernization, you know, 1MEF, we play a pretty significant role for the United States Marine Corps, again, just because we're the largest Marine Air Ground Logistics Task Force. But we're also blessed down where we live in Southern California to have, frankly, an unparalleled training venue down there, training areas. And General Rocco, when he was the commanding general of 3rd Marine Aircraft Wing, knows this well. It stretches, frankly, from the aviation ranges in Arizona up to our combat center, our Marine Corps Combat Center up at 29 Palms, out to the coast, into the maritime operating and training areas, which include San Clemente Island, all the way up north to our Mountain Warfare Training Center, Fort Hunter Liggett. And so we are blessed with tremendous training areas to innovate and experiment. And our Marines are doing just that. And while some of this comes top down, most of this is coming bottom up, I have to tell you. And it's coming up from just really phenomenally talented young Marines, young company grade officers, young staff non-commissioned officers. They're just figuring it out. They're figuring out new technology. And at the dizzying pace of technological advancements, it's hard to stay ahead if you're trying to centrally direct this type of innovation and experimentation. So they're really getting after it. And we're blessed as well with our close proximity to our natural fleet partners down in 3rd Fleet, but with a host of other agencies that we get to work with, like Naval Information Warfare Command Pacific, and a number of industry partners, not only in Southern California, but in the Silicon Valley. So it's really a tremendous opportunity to support the broader modernization efforts for the Marine Corps, and in particular, you know, I consider myself a supporting commander to 2 one-star commanding generals, one of whom is the commanding general of our Marine Corps Warfighting Lab. And so I think we are, at 1MEF, are making a significant contribution to modernization. That said, I think there are some timeless aspects of Marine Air Ground Logistics Task Force Combined Arms Warfighting. And I go back to an experience I had on Christmas morning, 2002. And I was at Camp Commando, a place called Camp Commando Kuwait, which was just a dusty camp that we had up in northern Kuwait. And that Christmas morning, we spent 4 hours around a big map board, all the planners, with then Major General Jim Mattis, the commanding general of 1st Marine Division, and then Major General Jim Amos, the commanding general of 3rd Marine Aircraft Wing. And what we focused that 4-hour session on was how we were going to get after seizing the eastern portions of Baghdad. We had already worked through how we were going to seize the oil fields in southern Iraq, which had its own challenges. But now we were going into a major urban center. And the complexity just ratcheted up. And the synergy of our Marine Air Ground Logistics Task Force was tailor-made for that mission. And while we're focused intently today on a number of maritime scenarios, as we should be in the Western Pacific, I can't help but think that we better be ready to conduct another operation like we did in Operation IRAQI Freedom. And that is Marine Air Ground Logistics Task Force Combined Arms Warfighting at scale. At scale. And frankly, that's why we have one Marine Expeditionary Force, because we will be able to do it at scale. You know, the power of our MAGTFs really resides in the synergy that's created by the habitual relationships that we train with. By the ability to task organize quickly and confidently based on unique mission requirements, which in turn generates speed and tempo. And at the end of the day, that is the timeless aspect of warfighting, the competition for time. And so that really is what I call the secret sauce, if you will, the fabric of our Marine Air Ground Task Forces. And I think that is absolutely timeless, regardless of what changes are occurring within our Corps today. And, you know, the most important ingredient, and I'll end with this, is that young Marine. That is our ultimate asymmetric advantage against any adversary. And I know that General Morris was up here last month, or the commanding general of our recruit depot down in San Diego on our Western Recruiting Region. He's the second one-star general that I consider myself. I am a supporting commander to him for recruiting, which when I talk to our Marines down at Camp Pendleton and down at Miramar and out at Yuma and out at 29 Palms, they all know by default they are supporting our recruiting effort, because it's all hands on deck. We all read the same similar newspapers or articles about how challenging the recruiting environment is, and the various armed services committees have just had a series of hearings on some of the recruiting challenges. So we are keenly aware of our responsibility on the recruiting front, and if I could make a pitch for General Morris, it's all our responsibility to go find the finest young men and women to join our ranks. And then we have to keep them. We have to keep them in our ranks. Now, therein is a real success story, certainly for one Marine Expeditionary Force. We've met all of our first-term enlistment targets already for fiscal year 23. So we're starting to work on fiscal year 24. We closed our infantry MOS last month. 2 years in a row we've done that. Hadn't done that for 5 years previously. And I talk to the commanders all the time about what are we doing different. And really it's just talking to Marines and looking them in the eye. It's not cosmic. So we are doing really, really well on the retention front, but we're keeping the pedal down. As I mentioned previously, recruiting remains somewhat of a challenge across the Joint Force. And again, General Morris and his team are doing great things down there in San Diego, recruiting the finest young men and women they can find west of the Mississippi River. I'll close with just a story of one of those young Marines, one of our horses. I guess probably need to describe him as a thoroughbred. A young Marine named Lance Corporal Christian Potgeider, who's a 0311 infantryman by trade. And he was assigned to deploy with our Marine Rotational Force Southeast Asia, which was built around the 11th Marine Expeditionary Unit Command Element. And he was assigned as a sensor operator. No training. He was given a commercial off-the-shelf, as we call it, COTS piece of gear that was a maritime radar to see what we could do to add to maritime domain awareness in the Pacific, focused on the littorals. So he took this piece of kit that he'd never had any experience on. He got into the manuals. He called. He found out who the program managers were. He called them. He learned everything he could about this piece of gear. figured out how to link it into our program of record communication systems, and was able to, at the end of this, provide maritime tracks to the 7th Fleet Maritime Operations Center up in Yokosuka, Japan. Never been done before. Lance Corporal. He then went on to write a series of after-action reports, submitted them to our Marine Corps Warfighting Lab and Headquarters Marine Corps, briefed a whole slew of generals and admirals on what he had done. Where do we find these Marines? But for me, most importantly, how do we keep them? How do we keep them in our ranks? Because again, they are our ultimate asymmetric advantage against any adversary. Because you can have all the right structure, organizational structure, you can have all the right operating concepts, you can have all the right gear. But if you don't have those Lance Corporal pot guiders of the world, all that other stuff is for naught. So those young Marines are going to make us, that are going to enable us to win tonight and in the future. Again, thanks for the opportunity to join you here this evening, and it's a great honor, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General Smith. If you'd like to ask write a question down, Master Gunny and I will come around and deliver these. Sir, we have 2 or 3 questions queued up and 1 comment. I'll start with the comment, and again, if you want a Q&A card and a pen, just raise your hand and we'll come around. Sir, the comment, one of the comments was, thank you for acknowledging the sailors as well as the Marines in your command. I love that the Navy personnel serving with the Marines can wear the Marine Corps uniform. That is the question, or that is the comment. The first question we have, and they're starting to pour in, a handful of Ukrainians managed to sink the flagship of the Black Sea Fleet. How does that change our tactics?
Can you say that again, Boots?
Yes, sir. A handful of Ukrainians managed to sink the flagship of the Black Sea Fleet. How does that change our tactics?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, I think when you look at the lethality, the relative lethality of small war formations with precision weapons who can stand off, that really that's a shining example of that. And frankly, some of the concepts we're pursuing in the Western Pacific mirror that to a certain degree. So I think, again, that is one kind of scenario out there, and we are working mightily to address that scenario, particularly out at 3 MEF. We're working on that as well in 1 MEF, but again, I focus more broadly on global contingencies as well, which may require, again, you know, a large-scale Marine Air Ground Logistics Task Force response.
Sir, the next question, would you please summarize the United States Marine Corps activity in Australia and its vision over the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, I think, you know, 1 Marine Expeditionary Force took over that deployment requirement last year. So that was our inaugural deployment down under, if you will. But those deployments had been underway for a decade prior to that, out of 3 MEF. So we are doing a couple things down there. First of all, we continue to strengthen our relationship with our Aussie allies down there. So that bilateral training remains hugely important, and it's, you know, it gets beyond interoperability at this stage. So there's a lot more kind of interchangeable components, if you will. So I hate to call it a kind of a microcosm of AUKUS, but we've been down there operating with the Aussies again for over a decade now, and that training is now becoming multilateral because other nations are wanting to come down and train with the U.S. Marines and our Aussie allies down there, to include the Japanese and the Koreans.
Thank you, sir. What are the one or two key differences in preparing a Marine to fight a PLA soldier compared to an insurgent in Southwest Asia, sir?
I think one of the challenges that the PLA has is their centralized command and control. And I think the initiative of their individual soldier will be an absolute weakness when the time comes, if and when the time comes. I don't think that will be the case for a United States Marine, right? So in a comms, let's just describe the environment. In a comms degraded or denied environment, I have every confidence that our Marines are going to continue to fight based on intent. I'm not sure that the Chinese have that same capability.
Sir, next question is a budgetary question. We live in an age of budgetary constraint. And what does the Marine Corps need to do its job? Essentially, what does the Marine Corps need to do its job with tight funding?
I'll stay in my lane. I won't speak for the Commandant, Marine Corps wide. I can just tell you that, and I talk to our team, our commanders, and our staff there at 1MEF regularly about this. I'm trying to squeeze every ounce of warfighting readiness out of every dollar we're provided. And as I tell our team about being good stewards of the taxpayer dollar, I'm looking for nickels under every couch, because I'm trying to squeeze every last ounce of warfighting readiness out of all the resources that our fellow citizens provide us.
Sir, I have a question. What are your thoughts on the elimination of armor tanks from the United States Marine Corps?
The Commandant made some tough choices a few years back, and tanks was one of the decisions that he made based on how he viewed the future for the Marine Corps. And he did it without asking for any more resources from Congress. So that required some very difficult trade-offs. That's a pretty basic answer. I'm not going to go beyond that.
Thank you, sir. Sir, the next question. A high priority item for China in Taiwan are the chip manufacturing plants. Have the Marines been trained on how to effectively destroy the photolithography tools and other advanced semiconductor processing equipment? The
James
author of the
Bond.
question.
If I knew, I wouldn't tell you.
Sir, please describe the integration of the reserve component into 1MEF and what unique contributions they make, if any.
So we don't do anything without our reserve component. Our total force is one of the strengths of our Corps, and it's certainly one of the strengths of 1 Marine Expeditionary Force. And I'll just give you a personal example. I deployed twice to Iraq as a lieutenant colonel as the commanding officer of Force Reconnaissance Company. And each time I deployed, I had a reserve platoon with me. And it took a little bit longer for them to get up to on step, just because you don't replicate some of those capabilities that their active counterparts had and had been training on day on, stay on for years. But they got there, and they were every bit as good. Now, what they really brought that I hadn't thought through were all the intangibles that our active component doesn't have. And that is, those reserve Marines who are in law enforcement or whatever the case may be, they bring a lot of intangibles to the fight. And that's really one of the unspoken powers of the total force. And I put a lot of stock in that in 1MEF.
Thanks, sir. Next question. In the spirit of change, the Marine Corps has begun to dismantle parts of the Marine Corps, scout snipers, tanks, and other capabilities. Can you comment on how those resources are being reallocated? What other changes can we expect going forward?
So we just talked about tanks, and with regard to snipers, we will maintain a sniper capability in our reconnaissance battalions and in our Marine Special Operations battalions. So it's not like snipers are going away altogether. We're also going to retain a 26 Marine Scout platoon within our infantry battalions because of the experimentation we've been doing. We've recognized that battalion commander has to have an organic all-weather reconnaissance capability. And so that's getting plugged back into the infantry battalions as part of this ongoing infantry battalion experimentation. The two experimental battalions just happen to be in 1 MEF and 1st Marine Division. 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines is undergoing experimentation, conducting experimentation right now. And then 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines will pick that up when they return from deployment. So again, this is, as it's been described as a campaign of learning, and we're continually modifying based on what we learned through this experimentation. I can't, all the specifics of where these billets are being transferred to, I don't have that granularity.
Thank you, sir. Sir, are you able to speak to what will be the Marine Corps activity in defending Taiwan when China decides to attack Taiwan with Army, Navy, surface, and Navy air, etc.?
Not in any detail. But your Marines will be an integral part of that.
Sir, another related one, you're probably not going to speak a whole lot to it, but how concerned are you about China's cyber espionage and sabotage capabilities?
I think we should all be concerned. I think we should be concerned well beyond the Department of Defense. You should be concerned here in San Francisco. We should be concerned all along the western portion of our United States.
Thank you, sir. Sir, this one's from in-house. Who is the king of battle, sir?
You know I love artillery.
I know you do, sir. And you love cannon cockers especially. So
I love cannon cockers.
Sir, I had to take that opportunity. So thank you for your patronage. Sir, you talked a little bit about combined arms capabilities during OIF and the ability of the MAGTF to bring all arms to bear. Can you please comment on your confidence in the emerging capabilities described in FD 2030, as you mentioned earlier?
Well, again, I think we have to look at all of these new capabilities through a MAGTF lethality lens, and we don't talk enough about that. I personally am paying close attention to the balance of precision fires versus traditional tubed artillery, and making sure that we have the balance right to indeed fight at scale in some of these different scenarios beyond what we're seeing in the envisioning in the Western Pacific. So again, I think that balance between precision, which, oh, by the way, is very costly. Those are some pretty shallow magazines just because of cost of each one of those rounds, and traditional cannon artillery, and the different missions that they have, right? You know, you're not doing a lot of suppression with precision weapons. You're not doing final protective fires with precision weapons. So striking that balance is important to me as a MAGTF commander.
Sir, thank you very much for your comments. If there are any last questions, please hold your paper in the air, or else the General Rocca will close it out here in a minute, and we can mill about smartly, as Marines do.
There's one more. Drone warfare. Yeah, I think, you know, it's becoming more and more ubiquitous. I mean, you see it in Ukraine, you see what the Iranians are doing, have been doing for some period of time. You know, it's tough to defend against. And we have to pay very close attention to the defense, to the counter-drone requirement. But it's becoming more and more, and it's low cost. And that's why it's ubiquitous, because it is low cost. So, you know, it's going to be a fundamental component. It is a fundamental component now, and it's only going to grow in its importance going forward. And then you get into things like manned-unmanned teaming, and you're going to see a lot more of that on the horizon. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Sorry. I'm blaming it on that gentleman back there. Yeah.
I was a Navy nurse during the Vietnam era, and the one thing that with all your deployments, or Marine deployment everywhere, how do you deal with foremen, nurses, doctors, hospitals? How do you deal with practicalities of health and injury with all the places that you deploy?
Well, I mean, you know, first of all, I start with my MEF surgeon, Captain Brendan Drew, who's just a phenomenal medical officer, loads of experience. And I think it's like anything else, it's leadership. It's leadership within our Navy Medical Corps that really drives that. And I'd be you know, I'm concerned about some of the adjustments within broader military medicine as far as centralization that is reducing capacity of medical providers out in the Fleet Marine Force in particular. And I think, you know, when we have to go, we may not have the medical capacity that we absolutely need to forward deploy. So we had a Marine F-18 squadron in Poland that was working for the commander of European Command at the time. They're not there now, but this was last year. I think, you know, Ukraine, many lessons learned. I think the one that I pay closest attention to, or a couple that I pay closest attention to, are signature management. What do I mean by that? You know, cell phones. Every young Marine or sailor has a cell phone. They want to take them everywhere. They can't not look at their cell phone for more than 5 or 10 minutes at a time. That's how Russians are getting killed. Because they're you know, emitting. So that signature management is something we're working very hard on out at our exercises, out at our combat center in 29 Palms in particular. Because of the ubiquitous nature of drones and overhead surveillance, just being one increased threat that we really didn't have to pay as much attention to just a few short years ago. I think the other piece in Ukraine is just the ever-growing importance of the information environment. So you see, the Ukrainian President Zelensky has done a masterful job in the information space, and I think that's really highlighted. He's been able to dominate that space, quite frankly. So, as I talk to our folks, our strategic communications folks, I go, you can have all the tactical victories. You can have all the tactical victories you want, but if you're not winning in the information space, you're not winning in this day and age.
Thank you. Thank you, General Smith. Hey, sir, as we close this out, you look around the room, these are some of the huge supporters here in San Francisco. And the question I have before I, again, thank you and we shut this down is, what can we do to support you and your Marines and the DOD of today? What can we do as citizens?
Well, again, I go back to the recruiting challenge that we have. And so when I say all hands on deck, it's all hands on deck, right? So help us find those high-quality young men and women to join our ranks. And then it's incumbent upon folks like me and my commanders and senior enlisted leaders to keep them. But we need help getting them into our ranks. And you all know about the headwinds that we're facing. Less and less our fellow citizens know the military or know the Marine Corps. So educating, I think, is job one. And educating those influencers out there, parents, teachers, coaches, pastors, whatever the case may be. Look, I don't have one day of recruiting experience in 38 years. I probably sound like a professional recruiter. But I know the importance of it. Because again, if we don't get that right, nothing else matters. That's where we really need your help. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And from all of us.
We hope you enjoyed this presentation from Marines Memorial Association and Foundation. To learn more about the organization and our programs, please visit our website at marinesmemorial.org.